From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. We're going to talk a little bit about YouTube. We're going to talk about some true crime revelations, and we'll maybe start this week's strange news with a massive leak. It's something a lot of people are asking us about. We were talking about it with each other off air. It's something called the Pandora Papers. So here's what happened. The largest investigation in the history of journalism of this type just released. Terabytes, like 2.9 something terabytes of information have hit the public space. The Pandora Papers are a cache of around 11.9 million files from all sorts of companies that are hired by very wealthy clients, like world leader type wealthy clients, to create offshore tax dodges, to help hide dirty money, to help wash dirty money. We're talking about stuff that involves everything from our own boy Putin and his crew. It shows you how they go about Putin on the Ritz financially. We're talking about tax havens like Panama, Dubai, South Dakota, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands. You heard that correctly. South Dakota. Who knew? It is a haven for international corruption. This is bigger than the Panama Papers. This is bigger than the lesser-known Paradise Papers. This cache of 2.94 terabytes of information is the biggest leak of its sort ever in history. And it goes from like Vietnam to Singapore to Belize to the Bahamas, you name it. If you are familiar with the international shenanigans of dirty money, then it's here. And this is like, there's a who's who. King Abdullah II has, who knew? He has a secret real estate empire that's worth $100 million. Vladimir Putin's alleged mistress also has $100 million, prompting one of us, I'll say who, but one of us in our group thread to say, I'm not super into like getting romantic with dictators, but $100 million is $100 million. I was joking, by the way, guys. That's not my price yet.
Yeah, this thing is intense. It's like you said, bigger than those other major leaks that we did a whole episode on Panama Papers. You can find that right now, but it is very similar. And it is, I think anytime you get to unmask some of these front companies, right? These completely legal, like legally created front companies, that's all above board. You're allowed to do that. But then unmasking those and looking at the people behind the curtain, it's, I mean, the revelations won't stop coming because there's so much information here.
Yes, and we need to give a enormous shout out to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. That's the full name of what you'll hear referred to in the reporting, the ICIJ. They started releasing this information on October 3rd of this year, just a few days ago. And this stuff we're talking about stuff like documents, images, spreadsheets, emails from 14 different financial service companies. And when we're talking about money here, we're talking up to an estimated $300 trillion US. And that doesn't include everything. That doesn't include like real estate, art, which is another great way to launder money, and jewelry, which is also not a bad way to launder money. The big issue is that, as we've said, and I think generally everybody acknowledges this now, a lot of wealthy people don't pay taxes. And it's not necessarily illegal. They just have the financial wherewithal to hire experts who will spend the time hiding the money in a way that the average person simply cannot afford to do in either terms of time or money. And now we have to start wondering what this leads to. What next? World governments have taken action. I know the Panama Papers some of the more cynical among us sometimes say, well, no one did anything. What has changed? But in their defense, different countries did take action and get their appropriate tax revenues. So the same thing will probably happen here.
So I have a question. Is this like, is this necessarily evidence of illegal activity, or is this just like a bad look, like a PR disaster for many of these folks?
Not in every case. It's not illegal in every case. And that's because we are, to a degree, the badger in the bag here is the reason it's not illegal in every case is because we are talking about many of the people who decide what is or is not legal. You know, like
totally. But, well, like for example, the king of Jordan, King Abdullah of Jordan, obviously that country has been the recipient of, you know, millions and millions of dollars in American aid money. All the while, King Abdullah II has been funneling millions and millions of dollars into the United States. Or he's bought all of these lavish properties in Miami and in Southern California and in places like that. So while maybe not illegal, definitely a bad look for a ruler who was, you know, ruling over a country that was in desperate need of financial assistance, right?
Yeah, so there are probably going to be some rough patterns of distribution and money movement that we can find and categorize later. This is a ton of stuff to go through. I want to thank everybody who reached out to me, not on Facebook, not on Instagram today or WhatsApp, but folks who found a way to reach out to me and asked a couple of interesting questions. One of the ones that was my favorite, and I think I reached out to you guys about as well, was the idea that this could possibly be John McAfee's dead hand. But for a couple of reasons, I don't think that's the case. I'd be surprised. Recall that he said he had 31 plus terabytes of information that he would release. And again, this is 2.94 terabytes. Still huge, still the biggest of its kind, but not what McAfee was saying he was packing.
Yeah, and they're also reporting that there are 14 separate whistleblowers, essentially, human beings that are providing this information. And, you know, I doubt that has anything to do with McAfee, just personally. But I want to jump to something you asked about, Noel, like, is it all illegal? And we were talking about that. Ben, I think Tony Blair's case, at least what's been revealed about him and his wife and the purchasing of a house in London, is probably a pretty good way to examine the, I guess, legal side, but terrible look thing that's going on here. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll at least set us up as talking about it, but the revelation about Tony Blair and Sherry Blair was that they purchased a home, but not the way, you know, you or I or anybody listening would purchase a home, by going to a real estate agent or a bank that owns the home and buying it from them. They had to deal with an offshore company that owned the house, I guess. And instead of purchasing the house, they purchased the company that owned the house. Right. And by doing that, it's essentially a tax loophole to where they don't have to then pay taxes on the house by purchasing it, because they purchased the company that already owns it. And now they own the company. It's just a weird thing, especially given Tony Blair's past, like fighting against the exact same kind of tax loopholes.
Totally. And just to double down one more time real quick on the Jordan thing, I mean, the country of Jordan is incredibly poor. They don't have like oil reserves and like natural resources like, you know, other areas in the Middle East that they're surrounded by, but they are a strategic kind of like diplomatic stronghold in terms of like, you know, negotiations and being this bellwether, preventing conflict largely at the behest of the United States, or at least, you know, with the help of the United States. They're kind of doing us a solid. And therefore, I'm not saying this is a quid pro quo thing, but the United States funneled $1.5 billion of aid into that country, and they are the third largest recipient of American foreign assistance in the entire world, behind only Israel and Afghanistan. So, I mean, someone's scratching someone's back, and then to see that the president of that company that is receiving all this money is spending, you know, $100 million in like posh real estate in the United States. It's not a very good look for him, to his people, I would imagine, but also to that relationship. You know, it just seems like there's something fishy going on.
Oh yeah, that's one of the distribution patterns, right? A loan is put through, or financial assistance goes through, and you have to ask yourself how much of that actually goes to the people, right? Instead of going to someone who later, through a front company or through a charity that they own, right? They funnel that money to the charity, and now it's part of the operating expense and stuff. There are clever ways to do it. Some of this stuff is almost certainly in conflict with the law. I'm sure there will be some Weasley term used to avoid saying illegal on the part of the many, many lawyers who are going to be doing very well for several years based on this. I've been digging through this since it broke, and one of the things that I think we'd all like to do is to make this a full episode. There's going to be reporting on this coming out for weeks. Even when you're listening to this next week, there's still going to be a lot of news. Now, as we know, there are a couple things we need to bust. The Panama Papers, one of the journalists involved, did die in a car bombing attack, but that was most likely due to that journalist's corruption investigation in Malta, rather than particularly the Panama Papers. So one group of guys you're going to meet, or group of people you're going to meet, is a very powerful law firm that would probably rather you not know their name. They're Baker McKenzie. They kind of set up this global shadow financial system. So you'll meet them down the road. You can learn a little bit about them now. But before we go to commercial, I'd really love to hear everybody's thoughts on this as we're researching, diving into this episode. 1-833-STD-WYTK, conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com. If you want to learn more, you're going to see a lot of very good reporting on this, and you're going to see a lot of fluff pieces, and you're going to see a lot of what I would say unfounded opinion presented as fact. So spare yourself the trouble. Go to icij.org, and you can see multiple reports on specific aspects. Pakistan, the Czech Republic, Sri Lanka, the UK, and Jordan, in Russia. The list goes on and on and on. This story is going to continue to develop, dare I say explode, whether or not Facebook comes back. Speaking of coming back, we'll be back in a moment.